We're on item 22 now, and this is a report on the water meter event. I want to, acknowledge the work that Jim and Suzanne and Marty and Dave have all put into this over recent months, and have worked closely with people on the at the water utility as well as people here at Austin Energy to cover the actions that have been done on this. And now we're going to have a report from staff on the after action report.
Good evening, Commissioner. Can you all hear me?
You want to have Kerry up there too?
He's going to take a back seat to this.
I see.
It's really hard for him to do that too.
So if you'll just introduce yourself,
Sure.
And then I'm going to turn all the questioning over to Jim and let him run that part.
Sure. So good evening, Commissioners. I am Monica Joyner. I am the Process Manager for Quality Management and Staff Development, and I will be walking through the water meter event after action report with y'all. The goal this evening will be to provide an overview of the report that y'all all have a copy of. While the report addresses the impact of the vendor meter read issue, it also focuses on the customer experience and quality efforts tied to improving customer satisfaction for resolution for high water bills. So we'll do this by walking through the event summary, reviewing the root causes for this event, and discuss areas of improvement identified, and highlight the work that has been completed to prevent this occurrence from happening again. And I did want to take a moment to also thank Commissioner Boyle for his input and suggestions on compiling this report, so thank you, sir. And then also to Commissioner Vaughn for her feedback during the working session, so thank you, Commissioner. So this is the water meter event summary, and as you can see over here, late August 2017, we transitioned to a new meter read vendor. In late September, we saw an increase in high water bill inquiries, and this was in line with seasonal patterns. So we did our standard review of comparing pumpage versus billed consumption to see if there were any system anomalies at this time. When the inquiries continued into October, Austin Water and Austin Energy began a meter-to-bill system analysis of the escalation. So we were trying to see if any escalations tied together any sort of pattern. In early November, a cross-functional team was established. And so this was comprised of leadership and subject matter experts from Austin Energy and Austin Water. And the group was established to try to figure out what was going on and identify a root cause. In early December, we began receiving inquiries from both this commission board as well as the Water and Wastewater Commission to understand what was going on, because you guys were also seeing and hearing our customers talk to you about their high bill concerns. Right around the same time, the cross-functional team was sequestered, and so they were co-located here in Austin Energy's headquarters in what was deemed as the war room. And so during that time, all of these staff members from both Austin Water and Austin Energy were reviewing things such as geographical locations, zip codes, just to understand any sort of pattern or any anomalies that occurred. It was Austin Water that first identified an anomaly at the meter route level. And so at that time, Austin Energy went to our previous vendor, Corex, and started to request data and their own investigation into what we were looking at. In late January, we identified a root cause of the high water inquiries, and January 31st, a press release and a press conference was held to advise our customers and the public and the community of what was going on. In February, we began the bill smoothing of impacted customers, and that's where we took the consumption and averaged it over 2 months because the way water rates are structured, it's tiered. And so we had customers that had a higher usage in September, so it put them at a higher tier. So we looked at smoothing them over the 2 month where they had a lower August. The bill smoothing was completed in March. And once the cross-functional team had mitigated the financial risk to the customers, it was in the right after we completed the bill smoothing, we began to formally document the process improvements and policy improvements, and that's still ongoing. So the root cause was 2 meter readers entered false meter reads during the month of August 2017, resulting in lower August and higher September usage patterns, which is abnormal.
So let's stick on this first. So this is the root cause given an antiquated system, right?
Yes.
The real root cause is we're behind on having an automated meter infrastructure. We don't have with Austin Energy for electricity problems with meter reading because there are no meter readers, right?
That's correct.
And so nowhere in this I've seen anything that really alludes to the capital investment plan by Austin Water to go do this. And I understand it's complex. We've heard DREMA be very professional in telling us what they're going to do, hire a consultant and all that. But I think included in this, it needs to also deal with showing the CapEx plan that Austin Water is doing to fundamentally change the technology over time.
And that's something that in the future we can come back to the commission and be able to provide updates on and have Austin Water present that information. Thank you. So Austin Energy manages the contract on behalf of Austin Energy and Austin Water. So the areas of improvement for vendor management were captured in 3 specific areas. We had lack of detailed vendor oversight at the meter reader level. We had lack of evidence to prove or disprove inaccurate reads, and there was a need for greater quality assurance. During the event, we had customers that were frustrated with their experience with us, and every customer should expect accuracy, timeliness, and great customer service. We failed to meet those expectations with our customers. The areas of improvement, we were reactive, not proactive, in customer identification. We had inconsistent customer service. We had a lack of empathy. We were asking repetitive questions, and so our customers saw that as dismissive. We had delays in response. We identified there was a need for improved analysis of trending issues. We should have found this out earlier and listened to our customers. And we had a lengthy resolution time. Another frustration point not tied to the unusual usage pattern were policy and processes. So there were limitations to the hearing eligibility. Customers were wanting to further dispute their high water usage, and they did not have the ability to do so. We have an administrative adjustment regulation that provided a scope that limited who would be eligible for those adjustments. We also had escalations that came across from a lack of closure in cross-departmental processes. There wasn't a clear handoff from Austin Energy to Austin Water or internally between Austin Energy to another department within Austin Energy. We had some escalations from customers that received 1 or more corrected bills without any explanation. So they got a whole bunch of bills and opened them up and weren't sure what that was about. And then we had some customers who experienced stopped or malfunctioning meters. So over the next 3 slides, you're going to see the work that has been completed over the past year. So in the completed corrective actions for vendor management, we have improved technology. So our new vendor has robust GPS monitoring. We are able to have 2 data points where the meter is read and where they use their cell phone to actually enter in the read. And that has proved beneficial because we didn't have that visibility with our previous vendor. And that's, in scope of things, it's like a cell phone. Its technology is advancing, and we signed these contracts years ago. And so 6 years ago, the technology wasn't there. And so our new vendor has this capability, and we're able to tap into and review that information. Under vendor performance monitoring, we have enhanced reporting. We are able to identify any data anomalies at the route level before the customer is billed, and so that is a new improvement. For the meter read validation, we have photographic evidence on each on-cycle meter read. This gives us that third data point for meter validation. For our customer experience, we took 60 leaders through 60 leaders and 120 customer service agents through a communication training focusing on tone and empathy. We established a monthly customer experience exercise, and that is where we take a deep dive into looking at customers' experience with us, what failure points were there. If there were not failure points, what are ways that we can improve service to improve that experience for our customer? And we also track this in our quality management system so that we have reporting to be able to provide to y'all on what does that look like, what areas have we improved and made a difference for our customers.
Ms. Joyner?
Yes.
May I ask a question? On the improved technology, I guess I said back one now, I'm sorry. Where you talked about the cloud-based access to meter photographs, can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So
how that's done?
Sure. So we have so the current vendor utilizes a cloud-based system so that we can access all the photos. And so what that allows us to do is validate. So if there's a question before we send a bill out, we can look at that read. We also have the ability to go in and do quality assurance on all of those pictures to validate the reads and be able to compare it to GPS locations.
And can the customer access that, or is it just?
Well, if a customer wants to see that, they absolutely can contact us, and we can provide that information. Now, future state, we are looking at ways to make that a little more seamless and less cumbersome on our customers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on this one? I guess I should have asked that before I jumped forward.
That's right.
Responding to the customers, we launched a proactive outbound initiative to proactively contact customers that were going to receive more than one bill. So if ever we had to do an account correction and correct a bill, we now contact the customer proactively before they receive multiple bills, so they understand what's coming and why they're receiving those. And then we also
that's across the board.
Yes.
So that's not just related to this event, right? That's a new policy going forward. Anytime that happens.
Yes, all of these are for all of our customer base, not just water.
All right, thanks.
We also increased monitoring of customer calls, and to put it in perspective, so what that is when supervisors in the contact center listen to calls to be able to coach the customer service representatives on how their experience and the call goes with the customer. Prior to May, we were monitoring 3 per agent per month. And during May, we increased that to 15 calls reviewed and coached with each agent per month. What we found is that the agents were able to listen to their calls and hear how they were responding or how their questions appeared to on the other end when they're listening to themselves. It gave them a better perspective of how that call and experience was going. It also provided embedment for the tone and empathy training that was going on.
Sorry,
Any questions on this? Yeah.
How many? I'm just thinking numerators, denominators. What's the average call per day?
So our contact center each agent takes about 80 to 120 calls per day.
So we were previously at 3 a month out of, okay. So
Correct. And that's recorded calls, and we also are currently in the RFP process for bringing an external vendor to add additional monitoring for that. You're welcome. Any other questions? For policy and processes, we refined 12 billing and metering process through this event. There were 2 new vendor quality assurance process where we now we trust our vendor, but we're going in now and verifying some of the things that we weren't doing before. We added quarterly compliance audits, and so this is to go and validate that all of the new processes and reporting that we put in place are being followed and completed. We also had changes to policy and regulation. So Austin Water updated the high bill administrative adjustment regulation in May. And so this allows additional customers to be eligible for an adjustment if they have an event that they have a high unexplained water bill. We also, Austin Water adjusted their administrative hearing eligibility to include high bill disputes. So if a customer wants to further dispute, they have that option now. And so Austin Energy and Austin Water share a commitment for improved customer experience. Our current meter reading vendor is providing a high level of service with continual checks to prevent fraudulent reads or other quality issues. We're continuing to implement a number of process improvements and monitoring tools. And Austin Water is looking at technology, including AMI implementation. And a close working relationship between both Austin Energy and Austin Water is bringing additional insight into potential process improvements. So if there's one awesome thing that came out of this event, it is that we have a better communication route and improved relationship with Austin Water.
One of the things I would like to see is just what Dave Tuttle had brought up. Can we get a report at some point in the future from Austin Water to find out about their AMI implementation, some deadlines and tests and, you know?
Sure, we can work with Austin Water to provide that update to you.
Okay, thank you.
So let me explain that rationale some more. So some of us have had situations where we had a leak on our side of the meter. Mm-hmm. And it's very amazingly fast to run up $1,000 bill with water, right? And, you know, it's bad enough for people who maybe can afford that, but for low and medium income, that could be very serious on that. And so one of the other attributes that's very important for this technology, and the reason I bring it up repeatedly, is the early abnormal usage reports, right, that can help reduce leakage, especially when we're in a drought condition in the future. Water's so precious. So the early alerts that you can have real time. And I think it could be also a tool. Is the distribution leakage about, 10 or 20% in the water system? That's probably for a good water system. Mm-hmm. And my reading, my understanding is when you have more sophisticated metering at the end of the line, that can help also diagnose and reduce leakages, which are important, again, for a precious resource. So it's not just fixing this. It's a core technology to help reduce, the loss of a very precious resource.
Agreed.
And the exposure.
Down that line, do you know if the water department is working to increase the use of gray water systems?
I'm not certain on that, and I can take that back to Austin Water staff and be able to provide an update for you to that question. Mm-hmm. Will that be acceptable?
That would be really great.
Okay.
Thanks.
I've got a few questions, but I wanted to start out by saying, in July, we had a draft report of the after-action report. This report is 1,000 times improved and much, much better than what was presented in July. And I want to applaud all of you for working on that and doing that. There are many good features to this report. But I have a couple things that I'd like to talk to you about, and I want to say this. I got this in Friday, and my comments here are really preliminary, and they only cover a few items. So I just wanted to do that. I also wanted to recognize that the chairman's already recognized the other folks who worked on this from the EUC, but the Water and Wastewater Commission also had representatives there, Commissioner Maya and Nat Ho and Mary Bell, and then the chairman of the Water and Wastewater Commission. So we appreciate their work and obviously the work of all the people who came and had to answer a lot of questions. So really appreciate that from the staff of the EUC. But I did want to, there were a couple areas that I wanted to follow up on. First of all, you've already talked about there were two kind of rogue meter readers, and I want to talk about that a little bit. But the Austin Energy, and maybe in combination with Austin Water, made a demand for money from Corex. Has that been paid? Has it been settled? Where is it?
Sure. So good news is that we are in the final stages of settlement. So it's already been, City Legal is finalizing that this week, and we can provide the actual write-up. It will be public information, so we can provide that to you. Hopefully, well, we have the Thanksgiving holiday, so by next week, if we can get that all settled.
Okay. Is it at a point where you can tell me how much is being recovered by Austin Energy? It
is not. So it will have the details. I know the amount that we were seeking, and we were limited with the way our contract was written. And so it is minor compared to what it cost us.
Okay. And I don't, one thing I did look at, and you talked about vendor supervision and vendor monitoring by Austin Energy. One of the items that, from my opinion, I read, of course, the Corex contract. I looked at all the documents that I asked for and received, and it looked to me as though they were not in compliance with their contract in terms of supplying certain data and certain information, particularly for July and August, which might have tipped you off a little bit as to something being wrong here. And did you go back and look at the compliance from a contractual standpoint of Corex?
We did. Excuse me. We did. We went through and worked with legal on everything that was missed during that last transition month.
Yeah, both July and August?
Correct.
And did you find they were out of compliance?
We found that there were reporting that they were out of compliance to provide us.
And is there not a provision in the contract that says if they're out of compliance, you don't pay them until they get in compliance?
And that's part of the settlement offer that we are looking at recouping the cost.
But you'd already paid them.
Correct.
And so, but you had the right not to pay them at all, didn't you?
We did.
As long as they were not in compliance.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the two meter readers for a minute, because I think in your and what I'm going to refer to here is the big report.
Okay.
Okay, and I think in there was a reference to maybe on page 9 that there were 135 routes involved here, which had 32,240 customers. Does that ring any bells?
Yes.
Okay, and that's I tried to figure that out. You know, well, how much do they have to cover? There are a total of 206,000 meters on the system. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And so you've got two meter readers responsible for 32,240.
That's
right?
correct.
That means approximately 1/7 of all the meters for these two meter readers.
So in reviewing this information, Austin Water put out a larger net because we wanted to look at any person. When we found the pattern with these specific meter readers, we wanted every route that they read, whether it was an off day, a different day, a rotation. So we included all of those.
Well, and that's fine. I'm not saying that all of these had problems.
Sure.
Okay. But what I'm trying to look at here is the responsibility of the meter readers. Mm-hmm. How many meters were they responsible for? And according to what I read on page 9 is they were responsible for 32,240 meters.
There was that many customers on those routes. And so this is where we benefited on the side of let's include anyone that was ever on a route that they read during that time. And then from there we went back and looked at who falls into the low August, high September range.
Right, and I'm not trying to say that there were problems here for 32,240, but that was the responsibility of those two meter readers.
They read those routes during that time.
Right.
Yes.
And so when I calculated, if they were working an 8-hour day, and they would get lunch hour off, and they might even get a bathroom break every now and then, and maybe even a coffee break, if, I don't know, you'd have to say, well, maybe they really work 7 hours. But when I went back to calculate it, they got close to having to read 2 meters per minute. That's a lot of meters. And when I looked earlier, I think the number of meters I think the goal was something like 500 meters. For those two individuals, they had to read 800 meters.
Correct.
And so it looked to me like that was a kind of a Mount Everest type goal. And at the same time, it appeared to me that as of July and August, that the Corex was down 13 meter readers.
Correct.
And so it looked to me like you were headed towards some sort of crash here because you were into a transition period, very short of meters. You had people doing 800 meter reads that was almost, to me, it seemed like physically impossible to do, particularly if you're having to cover, and I looked at your maps at the end in attachment A, which showed the parts of town. I mean, just to move around the town takes time.
And I think that's where, and you're absolutely correct, and that's where we have beefed up and really enhanced our vendor management because we were not as actively reviewing and planning for that transition.
Right, but what I missed in your report was any discussion about that. In other words, there's some discussion about the need for more vendor supervision, management, proactive. But there was very little discussion. Again, when you go back to root cause, what happened here, there was very little discussion of the things we're talking about right now in the report. That's, to me, I think I would want to add that a little bit, just to give the history of what's happening, not to, you're done finding fault with anybody. And so, but because this is something, I think it goes back to vendor management. It's not just an issue for the meter reading. It's an issue of vendor management. I mean, you've got lots of vendors whose contracts are going to run out or somebody else is going to take their place. And it's a dangerous time when you have the transition, is it not? Yes. And it's tough when you have the vendor at the end. They don't have much incentive to replace their employees or whatever if they happen to leave because nobody wants to work for somebody who's going out of business.
Sure. So what I hear you saying, Commissioner Boyer, I want to make sure that I get it correct,
yes,
is what you would like to see is us amend this and add in that particular information.
I think that's one thing I would recommend to you.
Okay.
The other thing that bothered me a little bit here on page 9, you talk about the 2 meter readers getting access to the information of the prior reads. And I assume those were password protected.
Yes.
And so the question then, because this goes to a security question, how'd they get the passwords? How did they get in there? How'd they get the data?
And we asked those same questions, what Corex was able to determine, because they were no longer a vendor at that time. They provide us they went through and did their own determination. The information they looked at were, and how they identified these 2 meter readers. We identified that it was down to these people reading. They found that there were certain IDs that were being used and information access outside of work schedule during lunch breaks, and that's the information Corex provided. Bless you. Provided to us, and so based on that information, we would love to be able to find out that too. That's not going to be possible, and I know that's not what you want to hear.
Well, I don't care what I want to hear. It's just
We want to
whatever.
hear. We wanted to know that too, and so
Right.
so
But-
we were limited in that capacity.
Well, I was just trying to understand what you've just said. That is, what you're saying is that on non-work time or when they weren't working, somehow they got access to the data that Austin Energy had about the prior reads. Am I accurate?
So in their setup, there were supervisors that had access to historical reads.
You
And
mean
so-
Corex or
Corex.
Austin Energy? Okay.
Corex.
All right.
And so somehow these two meter readers, after hours, accessed information, whether that was sharing of a password or watching someone log in. That is a security breach, but we don't have visibility to be able to know what truly that was and how they obtained that access.
How do you know they didn't get the information from Austin Energy? That is, coming into Runberg Lane, where they had a workstation, which was co-located with Austin Energy.
So we have access to anyone who performs work. IT has access. We can look at every keystroke, anything that's done on site. This was done remotely
Okay.
at their site.
Okay. And so then Corex was not willing to say, here are the guys who are providing, or how they got to the
Correct.
information.
I think partly what, I don't know that it was, they were reluctant to give. Those meter readers no longer worked for them either. So they were seeing data and making assumptions. And so there were a lot of unanswered questions that we wanted to know as well.
Okay. And the only reason I ask these questions, I'm not necessarily, trying to find the answer per se, except that when you have a security breach, you want to know, well, how'd that happen, and could it happen again? That's why you worry about it. Okay. There's another area that I didn't see in the report, which I was a little bit concerned about, and that is when I went back and looked at every video, KVUE, KXAN, there were a number of stories about the water billing issue. And also there were a series of articles in the Austin Statesman beginning in September, and some of the TV was in September. There were even a couple TV programs in July, August, that time frame. And the communications from Austin Energy, to me, was wanting just a little bit. And that is, there was it can't be our fault was kind of the message, that summertime bills are high, customers should expect high bills during summertime, or what's that?
The hurricane excuse?
Hurricane. We have very accurate meter readings. There's no way that they could get the data, the prior reads, and so on. But now I'm just speaking for myself here. But I looked at data, for example, I looked at York Bridge Circle, I looked at a number, and I looked at over 100 bills that were sent to me. And I could tell immediately, geographically, you had a pattern of people in various geographical areas. There were a whole street or that sort of thing. And that's the way this thing happened, isn't it? By geographic areas, there were whole streets. I mean, it wasn't like one here and then one 2 blocks over.
It actually was spread all over, which is what made it more difficult. And to even further complicate and create that, we wanted to find something. We wanted to have something to be able to start looking to see how we could resolve. So when we were getting the inquiries and we weren't able to find anything that tied them all together, meaning that they were all over, geographically located all over the city. There wasn't one item, as well as we had random pictures that were showing up. So that also made it a little more difficult to pinpoint.
And I hear what you're saying, but the people that were covered in the newspaper, like at Circle C or around Mr. Greer, who appeared here and so on, they were by streets, and they were next to each other. It was geographic. There were a lot of people. And I think the statement was made, even by Austin Energy, that these were occurring in clusters. So that you had people a bunch, they might be all over the city, but they were in clusters. So that you had a lot of people living in the same area having the same problem. And it just seems to me at that point, and you have these very abnormal August bills, then when you have them like that, doesn't it say to you immediately that this can't be a meter read? The meter reads can't be accurate because you were getting very ridiculous August readings, ridiculous, and so you were getting them in clusters. So it's not like somebody had a pool and they were irrigating or this or that. All these people, some had pools, some didn't, but they were all experiencing the same thing. So, and they certainly wouldn't conspire with each other. So, I guess the issue here is just identifying the problem. And I know that there was this effort to be up, very high-level system analysis to begin with. But the way the bills came in groups. There were groups of people in clusters.
And that's part of why one of our corrective actions is looking at proactively. So we used to reactively look when we get an escalation. That's how we would start trending, and so now we've built in reports to be able to look at that trending information on a billing cycle before the bill goes out, and so that's part of the corrective actions that we've taken to ensure that review or that look is happening. Also, it's a culture shift on our thoughts because our customers were telling us this.
They were,
and y'all were telling us this.
That's correct.
And we were so looking at nope, it's all over, and so it is really stopping and saying. Not being afraid and promoting the culture of, if you see something, say something. Because as we had focus groups with our employees, and they were like, hey, I heard it in this area. And so it was a lesson learned. It was a hard lesson learned, but it was a lesson learned. And we've put things in place to ensure that when any situation occurs, that we really are listening to our customers because they told us.
Okay. So a new section, suggestion.
Before we jump to one section, I want to make sure because you had made mention about future access and ensuring security breach. So I do want to make sure that that the commissioners do know that we went out and validated. We had our own IT go out. Our executive team, we met with Bermex. We went out to take a look at their access protocols, what happens when there's a breach. So I didn't want anybody to walk away thinking that that's not an area of concern and that we didn't validate and protect our customer information.
No, and I didn't want to give that impression. I was just looking historically.
Okay.
Trying to, when we were talking about root cause, and maybe the root cause is a little broader than just the two meter readers. That's all I was,
Okay.
All right. But I would say in the communication area, there ought to be something. In other words, talking about, well, here's what we did and here's what we said, and that a lot of it was problematic. Maybe some of it was a little bit arrogant. Maybe, you can kind of go through it a little bit and then see, okay, well, here are the improvements we need to make, and here's how we're going to make those improvements, just like you did in other parts of the report.
Okay.
I just think this is another area. I think communications is a big area and an important area. And so what's said on TV or what's said in the newspaper is important in communicating to the public about an event where the customers actually were correct. And it's just an area. I think communication is very important, and it just is missing in here. That's all I'm saying.
So what I hear you saying is there's two sections. I just want to make sure I captured it.
Yes.
There to add additional information around the vendor contract management, and then a component on communication and the different
problems,
yes,
improvements,
gotcha,
milestones.
Thank you.
Okay. Then I just have a couple little areas from here, just kind of going back to toward the back and of this item, and on page 33, there's a short discussion about staffing. And and there's some discussion about hiring some new people and that sort of thing. I guess what I'm worried about in staffing, and I wanted a little, whether there is important to flesh out or not, and that is we're at 2.7% unemployment in Austin. It's hard to find people to do work a lot of times for various jobs. And I worry about particularly this area because I think if I recall the contract, the Vermex contract, I think they're paying $13 an hour. And so what I was concerned about is that we not get into a situation where over time they lose meter readers but have a difficult time replacing them. And I wanted to make sure that we had a good, solid protocol or method of trying to get replacements and making sure that they're done. Now, maybe you covered it in here because, as I say, I just read this very hurriedly, and maybe you've already covered it some other place and I missed it. But that's an area to me is pretty important.
And that's a valid concern. That was a lesson learned at the end of Corex where they started to lose meter readers. And so part of what we've been working with Vermex on is each month there is a monthly performance meeting that's held with Austin Energy, Austin Water, and Vermex. And during that monthly meeting, we discuss performance metrics, issues, and staffing. And so they're already planning 90 days. I mean, it's a very different vendor, and it allows us to have future planning and being proactive instead of reactive, which is what we were doing with our last vendor.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I know it's a difficult task, not easy to do in this climate. And so I'm glad you all are planning and thinking ahead, trying to do that. About callbacks, I think there is some, and I don't know exactly where it is in here, about, and maybe it's not in this part where you've got the that last appendix, but you mentioned, I think just before the conclusion, or in your conclusion, on page 19 of the report, where you talk about, we were having problems, we weren't getting callbacks, some callbacks in a timely basis. So then I think there was something in here where I don't know if I can find it right off the top of my head right now, which said we're going to work on some sort of protocol on callbacks.
Yeah, there's a metrics. It's page 16.
Okay, page 16. But that's something you're still working on.
So there's two different things. So we have already put reporting and metrics in place. We met with the Water and Wastewater Commission last Wednesday, and there were some additional metrics that they would like to see. And so we are refining and continuing to refine reports. And so I'm partnering with DREMA. We work very well together.
Great.
And we're looking at how can we look at the reports that we have now and how can we make them better so that we never end up in this situation again. And so we want to make sure that our customers are responded to and that they're not having to wait. And so we're looking at areas and adding goals and looking at how we can improve in those response times.
And I think that's great. I mean, that the only thing when I see these various things that say in progress is it seems to me you should have some sort of milestone that you're trying to meet. In other words, there's some date out there. It may not, 3 months or 4 months. Maybe some of them can't meet, tomorrow, So, but it seems to me there ought to be some goal where you hit it. Here we want to hit this by X date so that we set some sort of target for us to meet this, to get this thing done.
And that's what we're refining. So we have targets that we're meeting that were set by Austin Water. So Austin Water has set, here's the parameters that we would like you to respond by. That we've met that target. Okay. Now we're reviewing, is that the right target? Because our customers are saying it's not. So let's take a look. And so that is what we're reviewing, and it will be constant, meaning that we may set a target, and once we hit that, we're going to figure out how do we raise the bar and provide our customers. Our customers are comparing us to other entities like Apple and Amazon when they call. And so we want to make sure that they have that experience with us. And so there's a lot of work and effort that will be ongoing and continuous. And we want to make sure that the people that we serve and the community that we live in, they understand that we work here. I hear about this event still when I go to church and some different things, and so sure. we want to make sure that I want to make sure as well that these things don't happen, and that our customers, do deserve better, as Barbara stated earlier, and I absolutely agree, and we failed to provide that.
Well, my only comment is, I think, given, as you stated, you may change, you may set a particular target or, response time or something, but it seems to me there should be some sort of goal and date by which at least you set something, always subject to change. As you learn new things and as you can always improve things, modify them, edit them later. But it seems to me some of these items that say they're in progress ought to have some sort of timeline associated with them, trying to meet that timeline.
Agreed.
That's all I'm saying there. And particularly, I didn't want to go through each one of these in the back, but I think that would improve the report a little bit. And I also noticed on the high-low, there's some discussion of high-low, and maybe that's on page 34, on what's high and what's low. And I know that's a tricky area. In the middle of the page, on page 34, talking about the high-low water process. And the last date that's talking about there's something like 5/28/18, but have you come to an agreement on what the high should be, or two highs, or the low, or how?
Sure. So prior to this event, we have already been reviewing annually, and that happens during this time, which is why that's where you see that date. And so further reviews aren't to look at, do we adjust the high-low parameter, and are they in the right way? We are we have our system working the way it should and gathering those items from a billing perspective. Where we have opportunity is, what do our thresholds look like? What is that dollar amount? Because sometimes when we're looking at consumption and someone has, summer and different things, irrigation, it doesn't always equate. So if we look at dollar amount and someone's bill went from $20 to $150, that's significant. If it went from $20 to $80, that's significant. So we're looking more around dollar amount and exploring those options for a threshold to create an additional flag within our system.
The other thing, I notice when my credit card, I get these notices, and all kinds, I frequently get notices. Is somebody using your card? And so I wonder whether it's just high-low or whether there should be some relationship between the prior month. For example, if all of a sudden your August is a lot lower than July, well, that may be a little counterintuitive. Now, it's possible it could happen. It might be on vacation or something. It could happen. But if it's happening in an area like a cluster, let's say, then all of a sudden some sort of alarm should go off at that point, it seems to me. And maybe not just for that individual customer, but if it's happening in an area, then maybe it ought to be something that trips that.
Well, I think that how we're satisfying, because we agree, we also need that early detection if there's a concern happening in a cluster area. Mm-hmm. So we're satisfying that via report, because when we're adding all these extra flags in the system, that's manual review for someone to have, and that then something else is going to get missed if we're not adding staff or we're adding all of this additional manual work. So we want to make sure that we're looking at what are ways that we can ensure that if we have early detection for something such as a cluster, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to add it in a flag in the system, but that is via report. So it's someone that using data to be able to flag and us to move from there.
Could I interrupt for just 1 second? I'm trying to get a line on timing here, because we're 15 minutes past our end date, if we are in time. If we
okay,
I don't want to cut off
an
important line of inquiry.
No, I just was trying, because I think this is a difficult area. I don't mean to say it's not, and you don't want to take everybody away to do this when you've got a lot of other responsibilities, and you don't want to hire a lot of extra people to do it. And I certainly can sympathize with that. Is there anything from an automation standpoint? I don't know. When they had the boil water, I got emails, all over the place for it. And so the question is there something that would be more automated where you could notify people by email, or maybe you don't have people's emails. I don't know.
Yeah, we do, and once we integrate AMI, we'll be able to have those alerts in those real
Understand.
time. It's just we're waiting for the technology to catch up so that we can be able to offer our water customers the same experience that our electric customers get.
And I hear what you're saying. We've got kind of this interim period, and it could be 3, 4, 5 years. I don't know how long it's going to be, but in any event, there will be an interim period, and I just didn't know if you had anything. If you run into a cluster-type situation where people can be notified, but at the same time not take away from their other responsibilities.
Oh, they are.
I mean,
And I think that that's what we're doing with the report. So we're looking, and then it ties into our proactive outbound initiative. So we have measures in place that will be able to look and identify and detect earlier.
Now, Ms. Joyner, I want to tell you I appreciate you being up here and answering and participating, and I appreciate Carrie working on this hard, and Dreama, who is great, and so and I think this is a big improvement. I mean, I think this report overall is a very good report, and so I think you did a nice job, and I just had those few suggestions.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Joyner.
Thank you.